Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nicole Medor. I'm the Early Childhood Specialist at the Department of Education on the Early Learning team. Our director is Leanne Larson. She's unable to make it today. We also have Marcy Whitcomb. She's our Early Childhood Monitor. Nina Cunningham is our Head Start State Collaboration Director. And Jane Kersling joins us as our new PreK Expansion Contract Grant Specialist. A few updates. The resource document is available at that site, bit.ly/3K3NH There you'll find a document that houses some additional links and resources that pertain to each of our sessions throughout this series. Today's agenda is much like the others. We'll review the topics, identify any documents or resources that could further assist you in navigating the topics of today. There's no necessarily important dates to look at, but we will have time for discussion and questions at the end if that is needed. So today's topics include CDS relationships, CDS coordination, as well as PreK screening. So I'll jump right in with some recent legislative information. So during our most recent legislation, we did have 3 bills that went through the Ed Committee. We had many bills, but those 3 specifically pertained to Child Development Services, or CDS. The one that most relates to our public pre-K programs was LD 386. This was a resolve directing the Department of Education to establish the process for transitioning the provision of early childhood special education services for children with disabilities from 4 years of age to under 6 years of age from the regional CDS system into the school systems, the SAUs throughout Maine. That bill is no longer being reviewed. It has been tabled and it has died, actually. So it's moving forward for now. There are no changes to the current process for identifying and serving children 3 to 5 years old with identified special education needs. That responsibility will remain within CDS. So services for 4-year-olds falls under what we call Part B 619. And like I said, currently that's under the provision of Child Development Services. Referrals are made to CDS by any adult who's interacting with the child who presents with developmental concerns. So it might be a parent, it might be a teacher, it could be a doctor, it could be a child care provider. So just know that as we move forward with your public pre-K programming, if there are concerns that the teacher or staff in the building are seeing, a referral can be made by anyone. Pending further evaluation of that child by a licensed specialist, an IEP team will be developed and reports will be discussed to determine eligibility for special education services. Services for 5-year-olds in the pre-K classroom and also Chapter 676. So there's 2 important pieces here. The first is that if a child is kindergarten age eligible, however, they're receiving their education in the pre-K classroom for whatever reason, then special education responsibilities fall to the SAU, okay? However, if a child qualifies for continued services through CDS under Chapter 676, then that means that the child will turn 5 between July 1st and October 15th of the school year, and they've had an IEP already in place that was prior to December 1st. So in that circumstance, the special education services would continue through CDS. If those boxes are not checked off for their child's age and the child's IEP date, then they would receive services, transition those services to the school unit, to the public school unit. There are many additional resources regarding what I've just discussed on our DOE site /learning/CDS. There's multiple links that will provide much more information around the bills that went through the legislation session. So LD 386 and LD 255, which pertain to the early intervention services for 3-year-olds. In Maine, we also have Chapter 101, which is our Maine Unified Special Education Regulations. Many refer to this as MUSER. And our CDS state level contacts are Roberta Lucas. She's our Part B 619 coordinator. And she has an assistant Part B 619 coordinator, and that's Jackie Schofield. So those two will also available and willing to answer any questions that you may have or clarifications that you may have pertaining to sort of the ins and outs of CDS. So anytime we have a public pre-K program, we want to make sure that they're coordinating with their local CDS site. So we always recommend that you reach out, get to know your local director and the IEP facilitators that are staffed there. These folks are going to be your first go-to in terms of students that attend your school and any concerns, referrals, or services that those students may have. So if you're not sure who the director is at your local CDS site, you can check here. It's maine.gov/DOE/learning/CDS/contact. And this will give you a phone number and email of someone to contact in your area for further communication. We also recommend that you try to set up some type of regular meeting, whether it's virtual or in person, right? Again, just to really get to know the folks that are working there, put a face to a name, and just really reach out to sort of say, hey, we're in this together. We're all serving the same students. What's the best we can do in terms of resources and information? The two parties, folks from the school and folks from CDS, can help each other document and process data, make sure that timelines for referrals are all understood and clear, as well as host and lead meetings. Folks can focus on building relationships and communication strategies among CDS and your SAU's special education team. These young students will eventually enter your public school as kindergartners and potentially transition to your school special education services. So having everybody at the table can really help to boost that whole process. You'll also want to assure that there's an annual MOU in place between the school district and your local CDS site. Head Start already has a statewide MOU in place. So for any public schools operating within a partnership with Head Start, then you're already all set. But for those areas of the state that do not operate within a partnership with Head Start, then you will want to make sure that you have an updated MOU in place with your local CDS. We do have sample MOUs, however, it's personal to the school and the CDS site. You'll want to make sure that you highlight information around screening, information around referrals, timeframes, things like that. Unmet needs is a large concern. This is a statewide concern. It's not something that is unique to one area over another. So in the event that CDS cannot staff or provide the IEP documented services, then there are some options that folks can consider so the child doesn't go without their required services. So one thing that we often recommend is to look at what the school already has in place for licensed therapy staff. So it's not totally uncommon that there's a staff person that is a licensed speech and language therapist, for example, who might have 30 minutes, an hour throughout the week that they could pick up a pre-K student who has unmet speech needs. In this scenario, CDS would reimburse for the IEP time of service to the school that has provided the staff. It's also not uncommon for the school to hire potentially a special education teacher or an ed tech to provide support services within the classroom. So although the special education services, the IEP falls under CDS, there are ways to contract services so that unmet needs does not happen. We also want to make sure and ask ourselves if there's a plan in place that all parties are aware of. So if there's no licensed staff to be contracted with through CDS, then we want to make sure that we're maintaining regular communication around what are our options for the student and what are we going to do in terms of finding somebody to pick up the student's services that's required. That might mean regular outreach to CDS. Hey, where are we at with this student? What can I do to help you? What's the plan in the event that this can't be picked up? And in some scenarios, virtual therapies are an option. This is more common for speech and language services. However, I have seen PT and OT services provided this way as well. It's a little bit more convoluted in that the therapist is on one end of the computer and the student is at another location on the other end of the computer with an adult present. The adult needs to be present with the student, of course, to make sure that we're on task and that any therapies or exercises are being carried out in a way that is beneficial for the student and not just something that's not planned or practiced correctly. And then, of course, as pre-K students complete their school year and prepare for kindergarten transition, CDS will set up and host a kindergarten transition meeting at the school. And this is an opportunity for the family and all providers to meet, discuss the child's strengths and needs within the classroom, and make sure that the kindergarten teachers and staff are all aware of what will need to be done in terms of potential IEP services, classroom accommodations, modifications, etc. And then, of course, pre-K screening. So pre-K screening is required for all incoming 4-year-olds. It does need to meet the child find requirements, and it assists in preparing the school to meet students, to meet their families, and prepare for classroom entrance. It can be done in the spring or the fall. I know many schools that operate on both schedules. Either way, pre-K screening should occur before the student starts, or at least within 30 days of that student starting school. So it's not uncommon for schools to host pre-K screening days in the spring now for incoming 4-year-olds in the fall. Depending on the outcome of that student's screening in the spring, then the team may determine that they want to refer the child to CDS for follow-up evaluation, potential IEP, or they may choose to re-screen the student once they've acclimated to the pre-K classroom and that transition has taken place. In the event that you have a student move into pre-K later in the school year, November, December, January, for example, then you want to make sure that that pre-K screening happens within 30 days of that child starting school, especially if they're coming to you without a prior experience in pre-K. Pre-K screening is not required for pre-K students who are moving on and transitioning into kindergarten. So for students that already participated in your public pre-K for the school year, they do not need to be screened again in order to enter kindergarten. That year-long observation and assessment of the student's abilities in the classroom will provide the kindergarten team with more information than a screening tool could. It also is not required for incoming students who might already have an IEP in place. So the whole point of screening is to see if the child will require additional services or assistance in the classroom. And if an IEP is already in place, then we already have been made aware of that child's strengths and needs. So a school must use a research-based developmental tool. Some of the most common ones that we see used are the Dial-4, for GANTS, the BDI, which is also the Patel, as well as ASQ, ASQ Online, ASQ Social Emotional Tools. We don't necessarily have a list of approved tools that schools could use, but these are just some of the more common ones that we hear about. Data from screening. So information from screenings should be used in classroom planning, especially when there's multiple classrooms that you're looking to fill with pre-K students. Data from your screening tools can really help to balance that enrollment. And screening results should also be shared with parents and families in a way that's easily understood, especially if the data presents concerning scores, meaning you have concerns in some developmental area of that child, you want to make sure you discuss that with the family and ask if it's something that they're have also observed in their child, if it's something that they've heard as a concern from other adults, doctors, etc. And just really being clear and upfront and communicative so that families are all on the same page. We also want to make sure that families understand that data from screening does not necessarily make or break their child's entrance into your classroom environment, whether it's pre-K or kindergarten. It's truly meant just to gather some preliminary information around the child's development. It should not be a deciding factor in whether or not that child is ultimately enrolled. Sometimes pre-K screenings can be coordinated with CDS or Head Start, or if you have another partner entity. Sometimes CDS has screening tools that they are willing to share with schools. Sometimes CDS will send a representative to help with the screening or to set up a table to interact with families, to answer any special education questions. So definitely reach out to your local CDS site prior to your screening and see what level of assistance they might be able to offer. And as similarly, if you operate with a partner in Head Start or childcare, certainly you'll want to reach out with them and see what they have that they could offer as well. And then I just wanted to show this quick video. So we know that pre-K screening informs our child find requirements, and any concerns would then go to a referral to CDS. And then ultimately, if a child is determined to have a delay in their development that requires an individual education plan, an IEP, in your public classroom, then we really want to make sure everybody's on the same page for inclusion of that child into your classroom. So this video is just a short example of what high quality student inclusion looks like. So I did just want to share this really quick. So our ultimate goal is meaningful classroom inclusion. And a quote from here is that teachers learn from other teachers and children learn from other children. So bear with me for just a moment, and I'm going to switch over to this video.
I felt nervous, very nervous. I was with him full time, and then to hand him over is nerve-wracking.
It's mostly fear of the unknown. I didn't know how we would fare in a classroom setting with all those typically developing kids. And then how we would understand those instructions. And those lessons that are being taught by the teachers.
In early childhood, every classroom is an inclusive classroom. Whether you're talking about children with abilities or just children that have had different life experiences up until this point. You look at your environment differently, and how is the environment accessible to every child, and how is your environment set up so that every child is getting exactly what they need.
Our mission and vision statement are anchored in high expectations and outcomes for all students. So living that out at the early childhood level, that was the work.
I think it all starts with that IEP process. So really having that evaluation team and the current team writing those functional goals and objectives. My goal is that services such as speech, OT, PT, all those could be embedded right within the classroom and the routines that we have.
When you are an early childhood kid between 3 and 5 years old, you want to do what your friends are doing, and to have children the expectation that they're going to sit and do one specific thing at any given time that you choose doesn't always work out. But when it's an itinerant model, having those service providers coming into the environment working with kids doing things that kids are naturally doing is in the best interest of kids.
We used to have our kids that are the kids in childcare, and then our kids with IEPs that were joining that group. So it kind of starting out to meeting those needs more individually, which has really turned into all that joint ownership. All kids belong, both reg ed and special ed teacher and therapists too, that we all are a team for every child.
I think teachers learn from other teachers. And so when you have special education people in there, whether it's an OT or a PT or a speech person or just a special education teacher, they are modeling different behaviors or using different words that as the regular ed teacher, you can listen and go, oh, I may be able to use that with another child.
He's learning in class, he's engaged in class, he has relationships.
Before, we were like thinking maybe we're going to be there for the rest of our lives to support him with all the needs that he got. But we are so happy to see that he can really do the things that he can do right now. Those skills has developed so much. He can truly create something wonderful, and that really makes us very proud.
I think what we know now is that there are more questions than there are answers, and to be open to every opportunity that you are given to learn and to develop always what's in the best interest of the child, and to give them those opportunities to show you what they need and to listen to them.
It makes me really optimistic for his future. You know, I used to worry a lot about, would he fit in? Would he get picked on? How would his classroom environment be? But he has become quite the popular guy at school. So he comes into class and I can't even tell you how many kids hug him. He has true friendships, true relationships in class. And he brings a special just energy to his class. And it's positive for his classmates too, to see that.
I hope inclusion promotes awareness to those typically developing kids that there are other kids like our son that need support as they try to learn their way through life.
There's a softness there, there's an empathy there that I see in his peers. So we didn't expect that, but we love it.
We know that young children need a variety of rich experiences with all of their peers. And we also know that not only children with, those without disabilities benefit from inclusive environments. Wisconsin's vision, every child a graduate, college and career ready, is not possible unless our children with disabilities have the opportunity for meaningful participation in their classrooms, in their schools, and in their communities. Now is the time to get past the hurdles. Whether you work in private or public school settings, in center or family-based childcare, Head Start or special education services, every one of us will be able to take great joy in making a difference for our kids and their families. As you move toward inclusive environments, if you are in need of assistance, feel free to contact the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. We'd be more than happy to help. Thank you.
So as always, any questions or clarifications that you're looking for in regards to public pre-K implementation, my team on the early learning team at the Department of Education, our emails are listed here. Always happy to respond as we're able. And again, any CDS specific questions, you can feel free to ask your local CDS site director or the IEP facilitators that are staffed there, as well as folks at our state level. I mentioned earlier was Roberta Lucas and Jackie Schofield. Otherwise, we'll see you in 2 weeks.